Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever set out to start a new habit full of, enthusiasm and good intention?
Oh, definitely. We've all been there, haven't we?
Yeah, only to find that motivation kind of fizzles out after just a few days or, I don't know, maybe a few weeks.
Absolutely. We've all experienced it. That gym membership that saw a ton of action for, what, a fortnight?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or the language app that's now just a forgotten icon gathering digital dust on your phone. It's a common, often really frustrating struggle, this whole quest for lasting personal change.
It really is.
So today we're taking a deep dive into a book that offers a remarkably different and surprisingly effective path. It's about enduring transformation.
Yeah, Atomic Habits by James Clear.
That's the one.
And what's truly fascinating about Clear's approach is how he frames habit formation. It's not this grand, overwhelming overhaul.
Right, not some huge life change all at once.
Exactly. It's through incredibly small, often nearly imperceptible adjustments, little tiny shifts. So our deep dive today is really designed to help you understand not just what he proposes in Atomic Habits,
Which is important, obviously.
of course, but critically, why these seemingly minor shifts have been so, profoundly effective for millions of people all around the world, actually.
And how it stacks up against other ideas, right?
Precisely. We'll also explore how his methodology compares to other prominent ideas in the huge field of behavior change.
So what are we working with source-wise for this?
Well, our source material for this deep dive, it includes a really comprehensive academic review of Atomic Habits.
Okay, good stuff.
Yeah, and several detailed analyses of its core principles, personal insights, too, from people who've actually used its strategies successfully.
Oh, that's great. Real-world application.
Exactly. And a robust comparison of Clear's work to other big best-selling self-help books on habits.
So a really rich mix of perspectives.
Totally. Our mission here is pretty clear. We want to extract the most potent nuggets of knowledge from all this, really get our heads around the book's foundational framework.
And look at the good and the bad, right? Strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. Analyze its strengths, acknowledge its weaknesses, and see precisely how it stacks up against those other popular approaches.
Gotcha. So the goal is really to give you, the listener, a powerful shortcut.
Yeah, a shortcut to truly understanding its huge impact and, maybe more importantly, its practical applicability in your own life.
I couldn't agree more. So let's just jump right into the core of it all then.
Yeah.
Why do these tiny, almost insignificant seeming changes matter so immensely?
It's the fundamental question, isn't it?
It really is. Atomic Habits, it came out in 2018, and it didn't just quietly arrive, it exploded onto the scene.
Oh yeah, it took off immediately.
Right. It quickly soared to the top of bestseller lists, and, for very compelling reasons, as we're finding out. Clear's central premise is just so elegant in its simplicity. It's basically tiny daily improvements can lead to significant change.
It's a message that really cuts through all the noise, doesn't it? Especially in the self-help world.
It really does.
Indeed. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this isn't just about basic arithmetic.
Although the math is pretty compelling, we should say.
Oh, the math is definitely illustrative, yeah. But it represents a really fundamental shift in perspective about how progress actually happens, how change unfolds.
Okay, how so?
Well, it directly challenges that deeply ingrained belief that dramatic results demand equally dramatic effort. Go big or go home.
Right. The huge overnight transformation idea.
Exactly. Instead, Clear really champions the power of consistency and the, frankly, often underestimated impact of seemingly insignificant actions.
Those little things we do every day.
Precisely. This principle, the idea of getting 1% better every day, it sounds almost too straightforward to be revolutionary, doesn't it?
Yeah, almost simplistic.
Yet Clear illuminates its profundity with remarkable clarity. That seemingly simple math, it reveals a really profound cognitive bias we all have.
Which is what?
Our brains are often wired to crave those big, immediate wins, right? We chase that instant gratification.
The quick fix.
But true, lasting progress, it often hides in the kind of imperceptible consistency of small actions, things you barely notice day to day. So Clear effectively shows us how to hack that very bias by focusing on the aggregation of marginal gains.
Aggregation of marginal gains, okay.
Yeah, turning that consistent effort into exponential returns over time. It's quite powerful when you frame it that way.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, and frankly, a bit mind-bending. Clear isn't pushing for massive, unsustainable leaps.
No, not at all.
He's talking about something much smaller, much more manageable, almost stealthy in how you do it. He unpacks this core theme. that small habits, those daily actions that feel almost negligible on their own.
Yeah, like reading 1 page or doing 2 push-ups.
Exactly. Those compound over time in a truly staggering way. And you mentioned the math.
Yeah, the 1% thing.
Think about it mathematically. If you actually manage to improve by just 1% every single day,
Which sounds tiny.
it sounds tiny. But by the end of 1 year, you won't just be, 365% better. You'll actually be nearly 37 times better than when you started.
It's incredible, isn't it, that compounding effect?
It's an exponential gain from something that day to day feels almost imperceptible. You might not even notice you're doing it. He really drives this home with a memorable quote, something like, "All big things come from small beginnings. The seed of every habit is a single, tiny decision."
That's a great line.
It really forces you to realize that the consistent small choices you make are exponentially more powerful than those, grand sporadic bursts of effort we sometimes try.
Right, the New Year's resolution effect.
Exactly. It
Yeah.
truly makes you reconsider how you approach any long-term goal, any big project.
And that Thumb 7X gain, it's not just a catchy statistic. It's a powerful demonstration that the trajectory of change isn't usually linear.
Right. It curves upwards steeply if you stick with it.
Exactly. It's exponential when sustained consistency is really at the forefront. And this principle, it can dramatically shift your entire approach to any personal goal.
Any goal at all.
Yeah, whether you're aiming to master a new skill, maybe embark on a health journey, or even just refine your daily routines, little things.
So instead of being freaked out by the huge goal,
Right. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by the sheer scale of some ambitious goal, Lear invites you to just reorient your focus. Focus onto these marginal, consistent improvements.
the 1% improvements.
Yeah, the ones that over time lead to profound and often really surprising transformations.
It's like the results sneak up on you.
Kind of. As one analysis of the book pointed out, success is less about some heroic act of willpower in a single, isolated moment.
Right. That movie montage moment.
Exactly. It's far more about the aggregation of these marginal gains, patiently accrued over weeks, months, and years.
Patience is key then.
Absolutely. And this concept he talks about, the plateau of latent potential, is crucial here.
The plateau of latent potential. Okay, what's that?
Clear explains that often, in the early stages of a new habit, progress feels frustratingly slow, like almost non-existent.
Yeah, I've felt that. You're trying, but nothing seems to be changing.
Exactly. You're putting in the effort, but seeing no immediate return. And that's where many people give up.
Understandably, I guess.
For sure. But the 1% rule teaches patience and trust in that compound effect. It reminds us that results often appear quite suddenly, but only after a prolonged period of consistent, maybe unrewarded effort.
Like what?
He uses the analogy of an ice cube. It only starts melting after the room temperature hits 33 degrees, right? Not at 32. That last degree, built on all the previous ones, makes the difference.
Okay. So you need to stick through that 32-degree phase.
Precisely. You need to trust the process, even when you can't see the results yet.
That makes so much sense. We're often conditioned, aren't we, to expect instant results?
Yeah,
And Clear really flips that on its head.
completely.
So, okay, that's the profound power of tiny gains.
Where?
But Clear takes it a step further, doesn't he? He fundamentally reframes how we even think about achieving our goals.
Yes, absolutely. This next part is huge.
He makes a really strong argument for focusing on systems over just goals.
This is a cornerstone.
So what does this mean for us? In practical terms, right?
Mhm.
It means instead of just declaring, okay, I want to write a book, we should instead be asking,
What is my daily writing system?
right, what's a process I'm going to follow every day? It's subtle, but it feels like a profoundly powerful flip in perspective.
It really is. This focus on systems over goals is, without doubt, a cornerstone of Clear's whole philosophy. And it's a distinction worth dwelling on because it impacts everything else he talks about.
Okay, break it down. Goals versus systems.
So goals are those desired outcomes, right? The book you want to write, the weight you aim to lose, the marathon you aspire to run, the finish line.
Got it. The result.
Yeah. Systems, on the other hand, they're the daily processes, the repeatable actions, the infrastructure, if you will, that leads to those outcomes.
The path, not just the destination.
Exactly. And Clear's core quote on this is pretty stark and very memorable. You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems.
Okay, that hits hard.
It does. Now, this isn't about completely ditching goals. Goals obviously provide direction, they give you purpose.
Right, you need to know where you're aiming.
Of course.
Huh.
However, the critical implication is this. If your system is flawed, if your daily processes aren't meticulously designed to support your aspirations.
Just wanting it really badly isn't enough.
Exactly. Then motivation alone, no matter how intense it feels in the moment or how fleeting it turns out to be, it simply will not sustain your progress long term.
It's the routine, the system that carries you.
It's the daily routine, the consistent engagement with your system that truly dictates your long-term success. One analysis highlighted that this isn't just like a semantic shift.
Just changing words around.
Right. It's actually a re-engineering of your whole psychological feedback loop.
How so?
Well, think about it. When you're solely focused on goals, any perceived failure, missing a workout, not hitting a word count, can feel like a blow to your identity, right? It can crush your motivation.
Yeah, I failed, therefore I am a failure.
Precisely. But when you focus on the system, any failure is just data. It's simply a signal to tweak the process, to refine your approach.
The system needs adjusting, not I am bad.
Exactly. It fosters resilience and continuous improvement rather than shame or discouragement. It's a much healthier way to approach progress.
Wow. Okay, that's a really powerful reframe. And building on that idea of systems, he introduces another major theme, one that feels even deeper, identity-based habits.
Yes, this is perhaps the most profound layer.
This isn't just about changing what you do, the surface-level behavior, the actions.
Right.
It's about fundamentally changing who you are, your self-perception.
It is indeed. It's a truly profound shift in mindset that gets right to the root of sustainable, long-lasting change.
So how does that work? Changing who you are.
Cleary argues, very compellingly, that the most durable and profound change originates from shifting one's self-image, your identity.
Okay.
It's about cultivating habits that aren't merely tasks you perform, but actions that are deeply aligned with the person you genuinely aspire to be.
So the actions reflect the identity.
Or rather, the actions build the identity. He outlines this remarkably intuitive two-step process. First, you decide the type of person you want to become.
Right.
For example, I want to be a healthy person, or I want to be a writer, or I want to be someone who is consistently learning. You define the identity first.
Okay, step one, decide.
Step two, you prove it to yourself with small wins.
The tiny habits again.
Exactly. Each action you take, no matter how insignificant it might seem on the surface, becomes a vote cast for that desired identity.
A vote. I like that.
Yeah, as he puts it so eloquently, your identity emerges out of your habits. Every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Wow.
So this process, it isn't about faking it until you make it. It's more like making it until you are it. The actions build the belief.
That concept, the idea that each small action votes for a new identity, that really resonated with me when I was going through the reviews and analyses.
It's powerful, isn't it?
It really is. It transformed even those mundane choices, like, say, opting for the stairs instead of the elevator, or choosing water over soda.
Yeah, things you might not even think about.
Right. It turns them from just a momentary decision into this incredibly meaningful, tiny yet powerful declaration of who you are actively becoming. It's like you're casting a ballot for your future self with every single conscious choice. Reinforcing that new identity, little by little, it makes even the smallest step feel deeply purposeful.
And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to maybe reflect on. Instead of focusing solely on a quantifiable outcome, like, I want to lose 10 pounds.
The goal-oriented approach.
Right. Clear urges us to ask, what would a healthy person do in this situation?
Okay, shifting the question.
Or, instead of, I want to write a book, consider what would a writer do today? See the difference?
Yeah, it focuses on the action tied to the identity.
Exactly. By tying actions directly to identity, it builds this intrinsic motivation that's far more resilient than those fleeting bursts of willpower we rely on.
Because it feels more authentic.
Precisely. It makes the behavior change significantly more sustainable. It's no longer just superficial behavior modification, it's deep self-reinforcement.
You're not just doing something.
You're being someone. You're not simply performing a task. You're embodying a characteristic.
Yeah.
And this deeper level of motivation, that's what helps habits stick.
Especially when things get tough.
Especially then. Even when the initial enthusiasm inevitably wanes, because you're not just chasing a number on a scale or a page count, you're protecting and strengthening your fundamental sense of self.
Okay, this is fantastic. So we've thoroughly covered the why, the amazing power of tiny gains, and that fundamental shift in focus to systems and identity.
The foundational ideas.
Exactly. Now let's get into the how, the nuts and bolts. Clear provides us with an incredibly practical blueprint for actually doing this, right?
He absolutely does. And it all starts with understanding the basic yet crucial habit loop.
The habit loop. Okay, I think I've heard of this.
Yes. Clear builds on the well-established neurological habit loop, which is essentially a four-step process. Cue, craving, response, reward.
Cue, craving, response, reward. Got it.
So the cue is the trigger.
Yeah.
It signals that a reward is potentially available, like seeing a donut on the counter or hearing your phone buzz.
Okay, the trigger.
Then comes the craving.
Yeah.
That's the motivational force, the desire for that reward, the longing for the sugar hit, or the urge to check the notification.
The want.
Yeah. The response is the actual habit you perform eating the donut or picking up your phone and scrolling.
The action itself.
And finally, the reward. That's the satisfaction that reinforces the loop, making you more likely to repeat the behavior next time that same cue appears.
And that locks it in.
Pretty much. Now, Clear's genius isn't really in discovering this loop. Scientists have studied it for decades.
Right, it's established science.
Yeah. His genius lies in how he then provides a structured, actionable framework built around it. His 4 laws of behavior change.
Ah, the 4 laws. This is the core practical advice.
Exactly. These laws directly manipulate each stage of that loop: cue, craving, response, reward for maximum impact. They make habit formation remarkably predictable and manageable.
Okay, let's break them down. Let's dive into those 4 laws, because this is where the theory really translates into practical, actionable steps anyone can use.
Let's do it.
The first law is all about making it obvious.
Law 1, make it obvious.
The core concept here feels brilliantly straightforward. Make the cues, the triggers for your good habits, so clear and visible in your environment that you practically can't miss them.
Front and center.
And conversely, make the cues for your bad habits invisible. Hide them away.
This law taps directly into the power of environmental design. It's a concept that's far more impactful than many people realize.
Shaping your surroundings.
Exactly. Clear emphasizes making good cues obvious and bad cues invisible. So for instance, if you're aiming to start a morning exercise routine,
Okay, common goal.
a concrete application is to lay out your workout clothes the night before. Maybe even place them right by your bed.
So it's the first thing you see.
Right. The visual cue of the clothes becomes an unavoidable signal. It minimizes that decision fatigue. The moment you wake up, you don't have to think, what should I wear?
Removes a barrier.
Precisely. Another example might be placing a book you intend to read on your pillow or right next to your coffee maker. Make the cue unmissable.
And for bad habits.
Conversely, if you're trying to curb a habit like, say, unhealthy snacking, the advice is to move those temptations out of sight.
Hide the cookies.
Yeah. Put them in an opaque container, maybe in a less accessible cupboard, or even better, just don't have them in the house at all. Remove the cue entirely.
Makes sense.
And Clear's powerful quote here, motivation is overrated, environment often matters more, really encapsulates the profound implication of this law.
That's a bold statement. Motivation is overrated.
It directly challenges the conventional wisdom that willpower is the sole determinant of success, doesn't it?
It really does.
It strongly suggests that your meticulously designed surroundings often play a far greater and certainly more consistent role than your internal drive, especially when that drive is inevitably flagging.
So you engineer your reality to support your intentions.
That's a great way to put it. You engineer your reality.
This is where Clear truly shines, I think, because he asserts it's not really about possessing superhuman willpower.
Which most of us don't have, let's be honest.
Right. It's about strategically setting yourself up for success. It's like, I don't know, rigging the game in your favor, designing your environment so that the good choices are quite literally the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
It feels almost like a cheat code, but it's really just incredibly smart, practical psychology applied to everyday living.
Right.
It minimizes the friction just to begin.
Precisely. It actively minimizes the mental and physical effort required just to initiate a desired behavior. And that leads us seamlessly into the second law.
Okay, law 2.
Make it attractive.
Make it attractive. So make it something you actually want to do.
Exactly. This concept centers on making the habit genuinely desirable, making you actually want to engage with it rather than seeing it as a chore you dread.
Because our brains like attractive things.
Fundamentally, yes.
Yeah.
Our brains are hardwired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. So aligning habits with what we find appealing is incredibly potent.
Okay, so how do you make, say, flossing attractive? Or doing taxes attractive?
Good question. Well, the main actionable tactic he provides here is something truly clever called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. Okay. Intriguing name.
It's essentially linking an activity you want to do something you genuinely enjoy, like a guilty pleasure even,
Uh-huh.
with a habit you need to do, but perhaps find less appealing.
Okay, give me an example.
So let's say you absolutely love catching up on your favorite true crime podcast. Total guilty pleasure.
Okay, got one of those.
But you also know you need to do your weekly laundry, which you hate.
Definitely hate laundry.
With temptation bundling, you'd create a rule.
Okay.
You only allow yourself to listen to that podcast while you're folding clothes or doing the dishes or whatever the chore is.
Linking the reward directly to the task.
Exactly. The desirable activity listening to the podcast effectively becomes an immediate reward or incentive for the necessary, less desirable habit, say laundry. And that significantly increases the likelihood you'll actually do it.
It's a very clever way to leverage your existing desires to serve your higher goals.
Yeah.
You're hijacking your own reward system.
Pretty much. The analytical insight here is that by strategically pairing something you already derive pleasure from with something you're striving to make a habit.
Like exercise, maybe?
Sure. You effectively increase the perceived value and attractiveness of the habit itself. It's a sophisticated form of positive association.
So the enjoyment spills over.
Yeah, the enjoyment of the desired activity spills over to make the necessary habit feel less like a chore and more like a gateway to something enjoyable. It leverages the brain's inherent reward system proactively.
Creates a positive emotional hook.
Exactly, a positive hook for actions that might otherwise be met with resistance or procrastination. This is particularly powerful because it uses our existing cravings to our advantage, rather than trying to suppress them or fight against them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Make it obvious.
Hmm.
Make it attractive. What's next?
Law number 3, make it easy.
Make it easy. Okay, this sounds appealing already.
Yeah. Right. This one is fundamentally about reducing the friction involved in starting a habit.
The effort required.
Exactly, because, let's be honest, that initial resistance, that feeling of an uphill battle before you even begin, that's often what completely derails our motivation and our consistency.
Yeah, just thinking about the effort can stop you.
Totally. So this law is all about minimizing the barrier to entry, making it almost effortless to start.
So how do we make habits easy?
Well, Clear's most impactful, actionable rule within this law, and maybe one of the most famous takeaways from the book, is the 2-minute rule.
Ah, yes, the 2-minute rule. Heard a lot about this one.
The idea is deceptively simple but profoundly effective. Commit to starting any new habit in just 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes, that's it.
That's the starting point. So if your ambitious goal is to read a book every week,
Which feels daunting.
right, the 2-minute version is simply read 1 page.
Okay, anyone can read 1 page.
Exactly. If you want to exercise consistently, the 2-minute version becomes do 2 push-ups, or maybe just put on your running shoes.
Just get the shoes on. That's the habit.
That's the start of the habit made easy. The reviewer of Atomic Habits that we looked at specifically highlighted how immediately useful this rule was for them.
What do they say?
They noted it lowered the bar for change so dramatically that it effectively built momentum where grander plans had always failed before.
Because it feels achievable.
Totally. It's not about completing the entire intimidating task right away. It's about making the start of the task so ridiculously easy, so minimal, that your brain can't really generate enough resistance to say no.
It bypasses the overwhelm.
Exactly. It circumvents perfectionism and procrastination by making that initial step basically undeniable. This is also linked to what psychologists call activation energy.
Activation energy.
Yeah, the energy needed to get started. By making the first step effortless, you overcome that initial hurdle, that inertia that so often stalls us before we even begin.
That 2-minute rule is truly brilliant. It's not about tackling the entire monumental task.
No, it's just the first 2 minutes.
It's purely about getting started. It transforms what feels like an insurmountable mountain into a tiny molehill you can just easily step over. And what's so fascinating is that once you've taken that initial minuscule step, put on the shoes, read the 1 page, the momentum often carries you further, doesn't it?
Very often, yes.
You find yourself reading a whole chapter or doing a full 20-minute workout simply because you tricked your brain into starting.
It's like a subtle nudge towards productivity that builds on itself. It compounds.
Incredible. Okay, make it easy. What's the final law?
It's an incredibly effective psychological hack. And that leads us seamlessly into the 4th and final law. Make it satisfying.
And it's satisfying. Okay, this sounds crucial.
It absolutely is. This law is crucial because it directly addresses that fundamental human problem of delayed gratification.
Right, we want rewards now, not later.
Exactly. Our brains are hardwired for immediate rewards. We prioritize present pleasure over future benefits, almost universally. It's an evolutionary thing.
So we need to make the good habits feel good right away.
Precisely. By making good habits immediately satisfying, even in a small, perhaps artificial way, we effectively hack that ancient system. We ensure the behavior is reinforced in the brain and therefore much more likely to be repeated.
Because the brain goes, ooh, that felt good, let's do that again.
Essentially, yes. If a behavior is not immediately satisfying, our brains are less likely to flag it as worth repeating, even if we logically know it's good for us long term.
Okay, so how do we make a habit immediately satisfying? Especially things like, saving money or eating vegetables, where the real reward is way down the line.
Great question. Clear suggests some powerful tactics here. One of the main ones is habit tracking.
Habit tracking, like using an app or a journal.
Could be. Or even simpler, it uses highly visible cues of progress, like the classic don't break the chain calendar.
Ah, the Seinfeld method, right?
Exactly. Where you mark off each day you successfully complete your habit with a big X on a wall calendar.
And you don't want to see a gap in that chain of X's.
Precisely. The reviewer of the book we mentioned specifically appreciated seeing their progress visibly marked. They noted how it made the entire process incredibly satisfying and profoundly reinforcing.
Just seeing the streak grow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look at that growing chain of X's or check marks, and you get a little hit of dopamine, a tangible reward for your consistency. It's a visual testament to your growing commitment. It feels good now.
That visual feedback loop sounds incredibly powerful. I can see how that would work.
It is. While the source material doesn't detail Seinfeld's personal calendar streak anecdote itself, the concept of a visible chain, of not wanting to break that visual record of consistency, is a well-documented motivator.
Creates an immediate, tangible reward.
Exactly. For an action that might otherwise only have a delayed, abstract gratification like better health months down the line. Furthermore, and this is really important,
Yes.
Clear offers a deeply compassionate and realistic approach to the inevitable slip-ups. We all miss a day sometimes, right?
Oh, yeah. Life happens.
Absolutely. So he introduces the mantra, never miss twice.
Never miss twice.
Okay, what does that mean?
It means it's okay to miss one day. Don't beat yourself up. Perfection is impossible, and aiming for it is often counterproductive.
Right. That can lead to just giving up entirely.
Totally. The key is the commitment to get right back on track the very next day. One missed day is an anomaly. 2 missed days is the start of a new, unwanted pattern.
So it's about bouncing back quickly.
Exactly. It's a forgiving yet firm framework for consistency. It prevents one single slip-up from completely derailing your entire effort. It turns minor setbacks into just mere blips on the road to long-term success.
That feels much more sustainable and human.
It frames consistency as resilience and recovery, not flawless, robotic execution, which is crucial for sticking with things long-term.
It really is a game changer for anyone who has ever felt completely defeated by missing just one day of their new routine.
Wow. Okay, so those are the 4 laws. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying.
The core practical framework.
A really powerful toolkit. So we've thoroughly broken down the core ideas and that practical blueprint of atomic habits. Now, let's maybe step back and take a more balanced view. Analyze its overall impact.
Sounds good. Look at the bigger picture.
Yeah. What are the major strengths that have clearly propelled this book into such a global phenomenon? Why has it resonated so much?
Well, one of its undisputed primary strengths, and this comes up again and again in reviews and analyses, is its incredibly clear and engaging writing style.
It's easy to read.
Very. It's repeatedly described as incredibly well written, characterized by concise, upbeat prose that, as one source put it, gets right to the point without unnecessary academic fluff or jargon.
Accessible.
Extremely accessible. Clear has a real talent for distilling complex behavioral science concepts into memorable phrases like the 4 laws themselves and easily digestible insights.
And the structure helps too, I imagine.
Definitely. The book also significantly benefits from well-placed, helpful diagrams and those concise chapter summaries at the end of each chapter. They make the information remarkably accessible and highly digestible for a really broad audience.
So it feels less like a textbook.
Oh, much less. It truly reads less like a dense theoretical text and more like a practical, user-friendly manual.
It's almost like he meticulously stripped away all the academic jargon and the theoretical tangents, didn't he? And just presented us with a direct, actionable instruction manual.
That's a great description.
That clarity and conciseness, combined with its strong, easy-to-follow structure articulated through those 4 laws makes it incredibly memorable and highly practical for implementation.
Easy to remember, easy to apply.
Exactly. It just works for so many people because it reads like a handbook of doable tips rather than some abstract theory. And that's an enormous draw for readers seeking tangible, real-world change.
That hands-on utility is a huge reason for its widespread acclaim, absolutely.
Okay, what else?
And that profound practicality is undeniably backed by strong credibility and widespread appeal. Clear supports his actionable advice with numerous real-world examples, relatable analogies.
Which makes it stick.
Yeah. And notably, hundreds of endnotes that reference scientific studies and research. Now, as we'll discuss, it's not all his original research, but it certainly adds a layer of depth and authority to his claims. It shows he's done his homework.
And the popularity itself speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Undeniably. Millions upon millions of copies sold globally, consistently high ratings like that 4.8-star average on Amazon, from literally hundreds of thousands of reviews.
Wow.
This kind of popularity is far from accidental. It speaks volumes about how effectively the book delivers on its promise for a vast general audience seeking clear pathways to self-improvement.
Okay, but as with any widely acclaimed work, no book is entirely perfect.
Right.
Even with its immense popularity and clear effectiveness for many.
Nothing's perfect.
What are some of the identified weaknesses or critiques that have been leveled against Atomic Habits? What did the skeptics say?
You're right to ask. And this maybe raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. While it's immensely practical, is this book truly groundbreaking in its underlying theoretical contributions?
Or is it more about the presentation?
Exactly. Or is its genius primarily in its accessible packaging and that highly actionable framework? Critics often point out that the content is largely a synthesis of existing ideas.
So he didn't invent all this stuff.
No, and Clear himself readily admits this in the book. He views himself more as a teacher and a curator of information, not necessarily an original scientific researcher conducting new studies.
Okay, fair enough.
As one reviewer rather pointedly noted, he has cobbled together bits of evidence from the work of others, psychologists, neuroscientists, etc., rather than offering entirely new research or theoretical frameworks.
So maybe synthesis is a better word than discovery.
I think that's fair. Now, this isn't necessarily a flaw, right? Synthesizing complex ideas into an accessible format is a valuable skill in itself.
Absolutely. Making science usable.
But it's an important distinction for those listeners who might be seeking truly cutting-edge, original behavioral science research. This might feel more like a best-of compilation.
Gotcha. So less of a pure scientific discovery and more of a brilliantly organized, highly effective compilation and presentation of established principles.
That's a good way to summarize it.
I also saw some commentary suggesting that some readers and analysts felt he occasionally oversimplifies certain points.
Ah, yes, the simplification critique.
For instance, that much repeated idea that small gains always compound, that 1% daily gain math we talked about.
The 37x improvement.
Yeah. Some have called that potentially misleading, perhaps overselling the importance of habits if you take it too literally in every single context. Does the source material elaborate on how that could be misleading?
It does, yeah. The oversimplification critique is certainly valid in some ways, particularly when the nuances of real-world application can be far more complex than a simple, clean mathematical projection.
Life isn't always neat math.
Exactly. The compound interest analogy is fantastic for motivation, no doubt, but in real life, progress isn't always a smooth, uninterrupted upward curve.
We hit bumps.
We hit plateaus, we encounter external obstacles, job loss, illness, family issues, or we face internal resistance that isn't easily overcome by just a simple 1% daily tweak.
Right.
The math assumes this perfect, uninterrupted upward trajectory, which is rarely the case in actual human behavior change over long periods. So it might set slightly unrealistic expectations if taken too literally.
Okay, that's a fair nuance. What about contradictions?
Yes, there are also occasional apparent contradictions that have been identified by some critics.
Such as?
Well, Clear frequently emphasizes the supremacy of environment over willpower, right? Famously suggesting that motivation is overrated.
Yeah, we covered that under Law 1.
But then he also includes chapters later in the book that delve into things like motivation rituals, the importance of self-control, finding your purpose.
Which sounds more like internal drive, not environment.
Exactly, which some critics see as slightly mixed messaging. They argued that these two aspects, your external environmental design and your internal resolve or willpower, aren't entirely independent.
They interact.
Right. And that willpower, while maybe not the sole factor, certainly still plays a role, even in the best designed system. You still have to choose to engage with the system.
That's a really interesting point, navigating that interplay between the external setup and your internal drive. It highlights that even the most well-designed system still requires some level of personal agency, some choice.
It does.
And I also read somewhere that some of the later chapters, like the ones focusing on finding games where the odds are in your favor, dealing with boredom, the Goldilocks rule.
Yeah, towards the end of the book.
Some readers felt those felt a bit rushed or maybe even slightly out of scope for a book that's primarily focused on the mechanics of habit formation itself.
That critique does come up. While the core framework of the Four Laws is incredibly robust and tightly focused, some readers felt these later additions, while interesting, maybe diluted the sharp focus a little bit for them. Less directly actionable, perhaps?
Okay. Any other major critiques?
Well, just maybe the more general critique that while the core advice is sensible and undeniably effective for many, some skeptics argue that parts of Atomic Habits can feel repetitive.
Repeating the core ideas.
Yeah, or perhaps overly simplistic in its explanations at times, maybe prioritizing catchy slogans and memorable phrases over deeply analytical insights into the why. As one reviewer rather humorously quipped, the book sometimes feels like it throws every plausible method for behavior change at the wall, hoping some of them will stick.
Okay, that's a bit harsh maybe, but I see the point.
It suggests that while it provides a wonderfully wide array of practical tactics, a real toolbox, the underlying theoretical depth or novelty might be less rigorous compared to, say, dedicated academic works in behavioral psychology.
So, a comprehensive toolbox, but maybe less of a foundational new theory.
That seems to be a fair assessment from the critical perspective.
Okay, that leads us perfectly into comparing Atomic Habits with some other titans in the habit formation space. This is often really helpful for listeners trying to figure out what to read next.
Absolutely. Understanding the landscape.
How does Clear's book really stand up against, say, Charles Duhigg's The Power of Habit? That was huge when it came out. Or B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits, which sounds quite similar in name.
Yeah, it's an excellent comparison because while they all tackle the common subject of habits, their approaches and styles diverge pretty significantly. They really cater to different reader needs and preferences.
Okay, let's start with Duhigg. The Power of Habit.
Right. Charles Duhigg's book, published back in 2012, is widely known for its more detailed journalistic case studies. It masterfully blends neuroscience concepts with broad, engaging, story-driven examples.
More storytelling.
Definitely. One reviewer describes Duhigg's book as a fast-paced, engaging tour de force because of its sweeping narrative style. It explores habits not just in individuals, but also within big organizations, societies, even social movements.
So it's a broader scope than just personal habits.
Much broader. It's more of a macroscopic view, using stories about companies like Starbucks or Procter & Gamble, or figures like Michael Phelps, to illustrate the habit loop in action across different contexts.
Okay, so if Duhigg is giving you this grand narrative-driven tour of habit science and its impact across different scales from individual neurology to corporate culture and social movements,
Yeah, a real exploration.
then Clear's book, Atomic Habits, feels much more focused, right? It's more concise, definitely more self-focused, and undeniably actionable.
That's the key difference, I think. above
Actionable.
ground.
It gives you that clear four-step framework, laws, and a strong emphasis on building systems specifically for individual personal development. So if your main goal is to find actionable rules and specific tactics that you can implement in your daily life, like right now,
Atomic Habits might be your immediate go-to.
yeah. Whereas The Power of Habit seems more about understanding the broader mechanics and the fascinating history and impact of habit formation, mainly through captivating stories.
That's a good way to put it. If you're, say, a CEO trying to understand organizational culture change, Duhigg might offer more relevant case studies.
Right. But if you're an individual, maybe an engineer or a student looking for step-by-step personal improvement guidance.
Clear is likely more direct and practical for that purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about B.J. Fogg's Tiny Habits, published more recently in 2020? The title sounds similar.
They do, and there's definitely overlap. Fogg's book covers much of the same ground as Atomic Habits, particularly the core idea of starting with incredibly small incremental changes. Tiny is key for both.
So what's the difference?
Well, Fogg approaches it from a more explicit scientific model, which makes sense given his background as a behavior scientist running a lab at Stanford.
More academic.
Perhaps slightly more structured in its scientific presentation. Some readers find Fogg's method more prescriptive. One analyst felt Tiny Habits provides very detailed roadmaps for specific behaviors.
Prescriptive how?
Fogg often reduces habits to his specific three-part behavioral model: motivation, ability, and a prompt, he calls it MAP. His strength lies in his deep dive into the mechanics of tiny changes, offering quite precise psychological levers based on this model.
Okay, so Fogg is maybe like the highly detailed GPS navigation system.
Yep.
Giving you an exact scientifically backed route for a specific behavior change rooted in his MAP model.
That's a pretty good analogy, yeah.
Yeah.
Very focused.
Clear, on the other hand, seems more like an idea generator or maybe a comprehensive toolkit. He offers a wider variety of tactics: habit stacking, temptation bundling, the 2-minute rule, environmental design that you can kind of mix and match to suit your particular challenge.
Right. Clear feels a bit more flexible, perhaps.
It sounds like Clear gives you a broader, more adaptable framework to experiment with, maybe more options to try, whereas Fogg might give you a single unified process to follow, but maybe with more explicit scientific rigor and a deeper explanation of the underlying behavioral science behind his specific method.
That's a very fair distinction, I think. Fogg goes deep on his model. Clear goes broad on tactics derived from general principles.
So where does that leave Atomic Habits overall in the landscape?
In practice, Atomic Habits really stands out for its sheer clarity, its incredibly user-friendly structure — those 4 laws are easy to grasp — and its breadth of immediately applicable tips.
It's just very usable.
Exactly. As one behavioral coach noted, Clear's guide gets right to the point, with formulas, checklists, even offers downloadable resources online. That makes it exceptionally accessible for the general reader who just wants to know what to do.
Yeah.
So what often emerges from reviews and these comparative analyses is that Atomic Habits is widely considered an excellent starting point for almost anyone embarking on their habit change journey.
Like Habit Change 101.
Kind of, yeah, in the best way possible. It covers the core principles in a really easy-to-digest format. Then, if you find you desire deeper examples or more intricate neurological theory, or maybe a highly specific prescriptive methodology like Fogg's.
You can branch out from there.
Exactly. You might then turn to Tiny Habits or The Power of Habit or other more academic works afterwards. Understanding these distinct strengths really helps you, the listener, choose your next read for deeper understanding, depending on whether you're looking for practical tools right now, a specific scientific model, or broader case studies and narratives.
That's a truly fantastic and really nuanced overview of where Atomic Habits sits within the whole landscape of behavior change literature. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, bottom line, if you're looking for a clear, incredibly actionable, pretty much no-nonsense toolkit to help you reshape your daily actions and build more effective systems in your life.
This is a strong contender.
Yeah, this deep dive really demonstrates why Atomic Habits is such a standout. It genuinely lives up to its #1 bestseller status for a very good reason.
It struck a chord, clearly.
It really did.
Yeah.
It's a highly practical, immensely accessible manual for building good habits and, just as importantly, breaking bad ones. It seems particularly suitable for general readers, maybe students too. Anyone seeking clear, step-by-step guidance and concrete checklists they can literally implement today.
Absolutely. And maybe this brings us to a final thought for you, the listener, to consider as we wrap up.
Okay, leave us with something to chew on.
If your ultimate goal is not just to build better habits through practical application, which Atomic Habits is superb for, but maybe to truly understand the intricate psychology and the neuroscience behind human behavior change.
Going deeper into the why.
Exactly. How might the actionable how-to of Atomic Habits serve as an excellent foundation, a starting point that perfectly complements a deeper dive into that why from other sources? Maybe more theoretical texts or research-heavy works?
Using it as a springboard.
Precisely. And perhaps more personally, reflecting on everything we've discussed today. What small atomic habit will you choose to implement? What tiny action will you take, starting today or tomorrow, to vote for the person you ultimately want to become?